everyone. I'm Ashumi Sanghvi, and I'm the CEO and founder of Mad Global, and I'm delighted to be here today with Nick Knight. Thank you today for your time today, Nick. How are you?
Pleasure, my pleasure. Very nice to see you, Ashumi. Very nice to be here. And I'm fine. Thank you for asking.
So I'm going to get straight into this. We're here to talk about Vogue Singapore and Brytehall's NFT drop that will be launching soon. Could you tell us a little bit more about the pieces that you have included in as part of this project?
I've given you a piece on a big project that we're working on at Show Studio with the Instagram star, I think is the right way to describe them, Ugly Worldwide. We've created a series of 8,000 NFTs of working with probably 30 digital designers, what I consider some of the best digital designers in the world, and also working with real world, not real world, that sounds strange, but people like Eugene Solomon who have done Ugly Worldwide's headpieces or hair. And it's an interesting mixture of real world and digital world. So, for instance, we've been in the studio with Giselle, who's been painting herself and using some of the NFTs to cover herself in them. So it's very performative, very almost like fashion theatre. So that's the sort of real world element. So actually working with Giselle in the studio in a very, very hands-on way. So she's using paint, and Eugene's making things out of eucalyptus bark or a lobster or feathers. So anything objet trouvé that he can put on Giselle's Ugly Worldwide's hair or as hair, and we scan that, and that becomes part of the NFT. So you have this mixture of this sort of beautiful avatar of Giselle, which we created over 2 years, actually, it's taken us, and the digital designers, so their clothes, and of course Eugene's hair pieces. And Eugene Solomon, for those who don't know, is probably one of the best hairdressers in the world. So he works with people like photographers like Paola Reversi, Craig McDean, myself, works for brands such as Martin Margiela. So he's kind of one of the most interesting, and he's one of those hairdressers that loves the art of hairdressing. Mm-hmm. So there are different sorts of hairdressers, and he's more sort of into sort of tactile and the substance quality of hairdressing, but very avant-garde hairdresser. And we work with Marion Newman, who is probably one of the world's best nail artists, who used to work. I first started working with her back in the 90s with Alexander McQueen. And she worked with me and Alexander McQueen for nearly all of his shows, and worked with me at Dior for all of the time. 10 years I was at Dior. So she's continued working for all the sort of Vogues and stuff since then. So she's a great, great nail artist. Eugene's a great hairstylist. And then we have 30 new talents, if you want, talents from a new generation. And I think it's really important to mix those generations so we don't feel it's a sort of stop. It's no longer that, it's just this. Mm-hmm. I think that's how life works at its best. I think you have to be sort of understanding that people are making a transition here. And so you need to bring people with you and mix up these different worlds so they don't become sort of, fighting each other. It isn't like nothing should happen in the real world now and everything should happen in the metaverse. It's as always, it's a fusion of different things.
Sure. And so, you said it took 2 years to actually do the avatar for Giselle. Yeah. Could you tell me a little bit more about how that process of that was? Was it photogrammetry? Was she 3D scanned?
All of the above. All of the above. She was 3D scanned in great detail. We used photogrammetry on parts of her which we wanted more detail and different slightly, like the hair pieces were all photogrammetry. And, when I create a photographic image, I will spend months working on the photographic image in terms of retouching it and colorizing it and making it sort of, all the sort of stuff. Just as we do with a painting. People sort of think that photography is a click and it's done, which is not the case. It's like doing a painting, you don't start off and just take a canvas and click, there's an image on it. It takes hours, days, weeks, even months to work on a set of images. So, I just took that level of intense kind of craftsmanship or craftspersonship and applied it to making the avatar. there are lots of avatars out there, and they're all interesting in different ways. But I wanted to make one which I felt was as beautiful and boundary pushing as I would want to see if I was doing a photograph or a film. So we spent a lot of time working on that. And of course, there's an awful lot of technical stuff that happens behind these to work out to train the algorithm to, only put this hairpiece with that dress, with that makeup, with, all those sorts of things. We got Giselle in to Show Studio for 2 days to do a series of makeups on themselves. Because I don't know if you know their Instagram account, but they are very performative on their Instagram, and they play a lot with their own identity. And so we asked them to make, to literally put a makeup on, we'd photograph it, and then they'd take it off and put another one on. And the looks are quite extreme. So all those had to be scanned and recreated painstakingly, and so they're perfect. So I'm really looking for something which I felt would be, as beautiful as I would expect from any piece of art. Whether it's a Pre-Raphaelite painting or an opera, you want something to be intensely beautiful, to be intensely well crafted and well done. It's fine. I like lo-fi. I'm certainly happy to engage in lo-fi. And with Show Studio, it's been almost part of the language of Show Studio because we had no budget to do anything other than lo-fi, which is just well, I liked it. So I do love lo-fi, but there are times where you really want to pour all the quality that new technology can bring to you into making something that is, quite incredible. And also you don't want it to look like it has no emotion, because Giselle is an incredibly, they're a real person. They have opinions and thoughts and emotions and all the things that anybody has, but that's being expressed in the NFT. It isn't a sort of, I think that the problem with some of the things we're seeing coming out onto the metaverse, some of the digital world, is it doesn't feel, it doesn't feel very connected to what we feel as people. So I think it's getting that as well.
And so how do you feel this particular piece for this project reflects the entire project as a whole, in relation to all the other?
We go into you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most remarkable pieces in the collection. It was put in Decentraland. So Decentraland asked me if I could put it in there. I said, yes, I'll put it in there. And we sort of rather strangely conceived it as a statue, because it is quite statuesque. It looks like it's made out of a gold metal. It looks to some degree like a sort of statue you might imagine in some park or some public space. So I quite like that. I like the language of statues and how people, or how different societies hold up totems of that society and make them into statues. Often, unfortunately, quite to unpleasant people who shouldn't be made into statues. But that's an ongoing debate, which I don't think is relevant. Or I don't think we should spend our time talking about that on this call. But I like the language of statues. I like that. But then it occurred to me that this piece, if you put it in Decentraland or put it in a virtual space, why can it not move? Because it can move. We have Giselle's motion capture, and we can make them move. So why are we not making this statue move? And then you start to think, okay, is statue the right word for it? Or are we defining statue by real world terms? We're actually in metaverse, a statue is something else, but then is it still a statue? So I like that I like pieces of work that raise questions and try and make us question our understanding of the world, whether it's the metaverse or whether it's the world that we have been used to for the last thousands of years. Excuse me. But the piece I gave you, so one of the things that I did when I was creating the Icon One collection is to actually use, I'm sure most of your listeners will know this, but there's a program called ZBrush. It's a 3D program where you could actually take your pen on your Wacom and you draw. You take bits, you extend and you create, and essentially it's like painting with shapes. So you can have different filters that do different things, and then you create an incredible, almost abstract version of the avatar, and then you brush back bits of reality or bits of the original avatar into that. So it's very similar to doing a painting or doing anything. It has an artistic side to it, which is down to my taste, my judgment, my likes, my desires, all that sort of thing. So it's very hands-on in that way. I'm actually holding a brush, which is pen, but I would be holding a brush, and I would be creating this piece through brushing things going through each other, which is actually very similar to how I work with conventional photography. So I wanted to give it that handmade part of it, so it doesn't all feel that it's been generated just by technology, although of course technology is part of everything we do. But I wanted to do something which felt sort of, that had opinions and, had some soul to it.
And would you say that this new medium of NFTs in particular is going to sort of change or impact your career as a creative sort of visionary in pushing the boundaries, or maybe connecting you to a different audience? How do you see this?
Well, obviously, I don't see it from that side. Excuse me. I see it from the side that it's things that I'm really excited by. I don't look at what I do as my career. I don't care very much for careers, or money or fame or power or any of those sorts of things. It's just not relevant to what I do. Let's have other people see you, judge you, and look at what you do. But I'm not trying to do this for a career. That's a sort of odd word to use. I do it because I love it. I find it
word for me.
super exciting. No, don't worry. It's fine. It's. I'm using the word you say, career, just to point out that's not how I work. That's not how a lot of artists work. One produces work because, in a way, you have to for your soul. You have to create work. It's not about the money that can bring in, and it's not about the fame or the power or any of those sorts of things. Those are all, to be honest, irrelevant. Most great artists, I don't want to just include myself in that category, but just to explain the point, most great artists would work if you locked them up in a concrete box. You just have to create work because it's something. It's how we see the world and how we want to see the world. So there's no sort of there's no desire to sort of do this to get further on in a career structure. In fact, very much the opposite. I'm not interested in doing things just for career. That's career, not Korea. So I'm very interested in doing things for career, but it's something, of course, that will connect me to a different audience, and the audience is important. Your audience, ask any rock star who goes onto stage whether the audience is important or not. Of course it is. To get to present your art form and to have nothing coming back is always very dissatisfying. And to be honest, part of the reason that I started Show Studio back in the 90s. If you worked for magazines as a photographer back in the day before social media, you would have worked for 2 months on a photographic story of 12 pages, hand it into the magazine. It would come out 3 months later, and there'd be no feedback whatsoever. You hear nothing. So that sort of started shaping my magazine relationships. So I started working on things that I really cared about in my heart. Like the lack of black models on the front cover of magazines, like the lack of anybody who wasn't just the same size or the same age. So I started working with those things because I think I want to do things that engage with an audience in a very powerful way. Then, Show Studio happened at the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000s. And the audience relationship was very important because then you do get feedback. And now with increased social media, we get a lot of feedback, which is great.
Sure, dialogue that becomes important.
Sorry?
It's the dialogue that becomes important.
Very important, yeah. I mean, it's just compare it to any musician, concert pianist or rock star or whatever. Imagine whoever you care to mention, Mick Jagger, the Beastie Boys, whoever it is, standing in front of an empty audience with nobody cheering or nobody saying anything. It's a little kind of remote. So it's not the most satisfactory thing. That being said, and this is, I think, an important point, is one doesn't work for the audience. One works for oneself, and one's delighted to have a relationship with the audience because it is important. But that's not why you produce the work. You produce the work because you have to do it for yourself, not for an audience.
Sure.
And paying too much attention to what your audience says isn't particularly good for the work. In the end, whether they love it or hate it, you still have to do it. And it shouldn't be based on doing things to get a round of applause, more money, or a lot of likes. I don't mind. It's not, it's not what I do it for.
Yeah, of course. But so I guess that brings me to my next question, which is, you instead of presenting this as a photographic print, you're presenting it as an NFT. What makes that different for you?
I'm not sure there is a difference, to be honest. It's just a different medium.
It's just a
You know,
different.
it's like if you make a sculpture out of bronze, or you sell, or you create sketches. It doesn't make any difference. It's just a different medium.
Yeah,
You know, it
sure.
could be on paper or in bronze or as a song or whatever. It's just a different medium.
Different medium, exactly. And would this be? You said you saw your piece in Decentraland already, and now we're going to go into spatial, which is where we're going to be launching this. Would
Yeah.
this the first time that you're looking at your work in sort of different virtual worlds and metaverses?
No, I've been doing that since since I started Show Studio. we 3D one of the first projects on Show Studio, which was actually in 1999. We created we 3D scanned models and created a virtual catwalk. And the piece is called Sweet. You can look it up on Show Studio.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the first pieces on Show Studio. So I've already, well, for a long time now, 20 odd years, been looking at my work in this space. You know, and I've worked, more recently I did the Bjork video for Ovule. That half of that is CGI. Before that, we did the Burberry campaign with Kendall Jenner, completely made of CGI. You know, there are lots of, you just go back, whether it's Burberry or Kanye or whoever it is, Black Skinhead was all CGI. You know, I've just finished the Chromatica tour with Gaga, Lady Gaga, incredible performer. A lot of that was CGI. You know, so it's just one of the sort of strands that way I create. That I think the whole idea is to really embrace new ways of creating, and not to be sort of scared of them or treat them in a negative way. You know, it's no, in a way, it's just new ways of trying to express yourself, and some of these are quite radically different from conventional ways. You know, conventionally, I'm a photographer. I started taking photographs in the mid 1970s. And I picked up a camera and you pointed at your subject and you got a roll of film out and you developed it and printed it. That's conventional photography. By the end of the 1980s, I was working on a Quantel paint box where I could scan the photograph in and then completely change it. And this is pre-Photoshop. So, you know, these are just ways of working. I would say rather glibly, it's a bit like having a different lens for your camera. You know, you just see things in a slightly different way. You know, if you're only ever used to a wide angle lens and you suddenly get a telephoto, you know, all of a sudden you see the world in a different way. There are bits of technology coming out now, like Midjourney and DALL-E, those sorts of things coming out now, where you type words in and you get images back. You know, that completely changes how people who are used to visualizing the world start to interact with their work. Absolutely. You know, so it just things are changing, and I think one has to be very open-minded about them and very enthusiastic about them. And I think, you know, my point that I make nearly every time I get interviewed on this is that the metaverse has to be created by people who care about life. Mm-hmm. You know, it'll be formed and to some degree created by the military, because they use a lot of technology, and big business, capitalism, big business, people who make money. That means that the new world that we have access to now will be formed by people who enjoy killing and making money. So killing and greed aren't necessarily how we should be forming the new world. No. So I think we have a chance to create a new world based on things which this world is not created on. This world was based on killing and greed. You know, so I think we should look very carefully. We have a chance to create a new version of the world, and that is a big conversation. But a new version of the world, not to replace the existing one, but to live as part of it. Then we really have to have the artists creating that world. So I get quite passionate when I talk to other artists who might be a little bit, well, it's not real. You have to have a real thing in your hand and blah, 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 blah. All that sort of negativity about the metaverse, and all the sort of negativity about NFTs and all that sort of thing. You really need people involved in this who care about life. So exactly why they're saying that perhaps they react against the idea of a metaverse or digital work, you know, it's because they care very passionately about the tangibility of their work and the physicality of their work and all those sorts of things. Those passions should be the passions that are creating this world. You know, the fashion world as we know it is not doing a very good job. You know, the fashion world is the third biggest polluter on the planet. we have to really the fashion world does need to start to take that into some consideration. We produce endless clothes, endless clothes, using our natural resources all the time and polluting the planet in so doing, and creating division and all manner of negative things. Now, I'm not in any way saying the fashion world is a bad thing. It's not. It's an incredibly important part of every society. But we have to acknowledge at some point that the fashion world, as it stands with its fashion shows and its enormous amounts of waste and of our resources and all kind of pollution that it creates, is not a good model. So let's try and make a better model in the metaverse. If I'm producing all the clothes that were produced for this, did not pull on natural resources. There's been a merger in Ethereum at the moment, which means that my NFTs that I'm producing are not going to pollute the world, are not going to use up vast quantities of electricity, and therefore. So, we waited for that to happen before we launched them. We didn't want to launch them prior to that merger. So now the merger has happened. The pollution that NFTs used to cause is not part of my NFTs. Ours do not pollute. So, it's very important to me, I try and do things for the well-being of the planet. And I think just continuing in a sort of, the way we're going at the moment, and just sort of accepting we need more and more and more and more, and not looking at sustainability and not looking at the pollution that the fashion industry causes, is not the correct way to go on. But I just wanted to say that doesn't mean I'm having a big sort of, the fashion industry is awful. No, fashion is incredibly important to us, and there are some amazing artists working in it. I'm not doing it, but I think we need to look to the future, and fashion by its definition is an art form that is future predictive. So it does need to be looking at the future and not just back over its shoulder.
Yes, absolutely. That is absolutely correct. And I think sustainability, in a sense, is such a sort of wide subject, and how digital worlds and new digital realities, including digital fashion, will become and play a big part in answering some of those questions, and pushing the boundaries on how some of that is also addressed moving forward. So I think that brings me to my last question, just kind of coming back to the icon drop. For all of these wonderful, amazingly just beautiful and rare NFTs that have been created with Giselle, and you're going to be kind of launching to 8,000, possibly potentially 8,000. I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to buy more than just one, but let's say potentially 8,000 new collectors. Would this mean that they will then become part of your sort of new world, and what does that mean for them
going
forward?
Exactly that.
Yes.
It means exactly that. This isn't a one-off drop where we sort of don't do it again or repeat the formula. This is a ticket, an invitation, a membership card, or however you want to describe it, into the world of Show Studio. So, there are events that then come throughout the next, which are planned throughout the next couple of years, actually, and already we're starting working on them. One of the first things that happens is this NFT drop, allows you into a virtual fashion shoot with myself and Giselle. So there's an avatar being created of me, and obviously we have the avatar of Giselle. And then you will be able to see us working together, and the people who have, some of the NFTs will allow you actually, for me to photograph in a virtual sense, your outfit, your NFT.
Wow.
So Giselle will wear the NFT you bought, and I will photograph it, and you get a picture from that. It'll allow, of course, everybody into the space, but only certain people who've bought the NFTs will be allowed to have sort of perhaps more access. They might be able to look through my camera or ask me specific questions or whatever it is. But everybody, of course, will be allowed into the space. But it is the beginning of a way of saying, this is a way into Show Studio. This is every time that we do a project, and there are lots planned and super exciting ones. This will give you some sort of way into that. And of course, there are things, I don't want to list them because I think there's too many people listing what they will do. So let's just do them and not list them. But there are things that you will get from getting on these NFTs. Giselle was in the studio yesterday painting sweatshirts, painting hoodies, Show Studio hoodies, because one of the items she wears is a Show Studio hoodie, which has got my photograph on the front of it. From when I first started, so the back of the skinhead's head from my skinhead book, that's on the front of the sweatshirt, but she was painting all over it. So some people will get those. So there are real world outcomes from this, as well as a membership of a community which is forward looking and hopefully a community of exciting people who want to do creative things in a new way. And I think it's very important to try and allow people into that. Show Studio's ethos has always been about the process of creating. It's always been about how we do things. We never just arrogantly present something and say, we're not going to tell you how we do it. We always show you and allow people into that creative process. And that's exactly the same as we're going to be doing for the NFTs.
And that's what makes it so as someone, and just speaking for personal experience, as someone who's sort of worked in the fashion industry for the last 15 or 20 years, it has always been an industry, that has been very gated by the nature of the way it is. So, and that's why, visionaries like you who've always sort of opened those gates and allowed people in and made it such a place that felt a little bit more inclusive and allowing people to sort of come into that world and co-create with you is fantastic and very exciting. So, this is very exciting for everyone who will be collecting also your NFTs and part of future projects. So.
Well, I'm very pleased if it is. It's incredibly exciting for me. It feels like the same rush of energy I had when I first started Show Studio 22 years ago. It feels as exciting as that for me. I haven't felt that sort of desire to get up kind of in the morning. So kind of let me at it. And you've got to start. It's I guess in a sort of silly way, it's my happy place. It's a project that I'm doing which makes me excited and happy. I'm going to the studio today to work more with Giselle, more with Eugene, creating more things for this project, in a physical sense. I'm looking forward to my day. I know I'm going to create things, and we do things. You can come and watch it on Show Studio. All today, the webcam will be open, and people can watch what we're doing.
That's fantastic.
So, nothing is hidden away because it's just a basic human thing. I'm very, very excited by the world I live in and what I do. And I don't see any reason that people shouldn't see that. If I'm excited for it, then hopefully other people will find it exciting. So it's just pleasure, really.
Thank you so much for your time today, Nick. I'm forever grateful for
I'm very happy to talk to you. Very happy to
sharing all of your experiences. And we're very excited to have you part of this project.